All right, today you're going to be actually taking a mastery ticket on ecological succession, which is what we talked about on Friday. You had a lot of videos and work that went along with that lesson, so we should have a lot of practice in what ecological succession might look like. Before we do that, we're going to take a look back at our final task for our Geology on Mars module, which was writing your actual argument. Some of us did a really good job of writing our argument on what we think actually formed the channel on Mars, and some people might need to go back and actually do some more work to edit that and better put together your argument with evidence and reasoning about what formed that channel. So our task prompt looked like this, and our goal was to answer what geological process could have formed the channel on Mars, either claim 1, flowing water, or claim 2, flowing lava. First thing you want to check if you go back and look at your work is, did you answer that question? And a lot of people that just didn't tell me either one of those claims, you should make sure that you have that claim. Our evidence, you should have included what you actually see in one of these cards, if not more of these cards. So the best card to probably talk about was evidence card F. Most people that did really well on this chose to focus on this one, but you could have also brought up evidence card A and C and talk about what you see in them. And then your reasoning is connecting what you see in these cards to why you think you're correct about your claim. So I'm going to look at an exemplar really quick, someone that did a really good job on this. And we're going to actually take a look at Jasmine Gurley's argument here. So you can use Jasmine's as a kind of starting point if you need to go back and edit your own and make sure that it sounds kind of similar in the way that she wrote her argument and the way that she backed up her evidence with reasoning. So there was a little checklist that went with each of your questions or each of your sections for claim, evidence, reasoning. You could use that to make sure that you were doing everything you needed to do for that section. In the claim, Jasmine wrote, "My answer is claim 1. Flowing water could have formed the channel on Mars's surface." So right away, I can go ahead and just check off what Jasmine did. Did she answer the question? Yes, she said flowing water formed the channel. So she answered the question and she chose one of her claims. She stayed on topic. Your claim only really needs to be one statement, one sentence. And she did exactly that. She didn't go into like a rant about why yet. She just gave me her claim. So that is a perfect 2-point claim. If I were to go back up to my rubric on how you guys are being scored in the claim, I'm going to go ahead and check off that Jasmine got her full 2 points here. All right. Then my reasoning would be the next thing I want to look at. I'm looking for my reasoning to give a specific example, show what I can see. It should support my claim, and it should have full sentences. Jasmine wrote, "My first piece of evidence is evidence card F. On card F, it states that the rock was found on Mars at the bottom of a triangle surface at the base of the triangle. These rocks are called conglomerate with many different sizes and colors." So what she did here is she actually went ahead and told me what she saw in that card. I'm going to highlight that. She told me where it was found. She also told me what it actually looked like. She even gave some background knowledge of like what that rock is called, conglomerate. In the text, it says that conglomerate is a round shape with different types of sediments and sizes. Rock flowing from lava is going to be black and is going to look the same. So she means like the same throughout the rock, meaning that it won't look like it has all these different pieces in it. So that is exactly what the picture shows. If I went through this, I would say that she did absolutely write in complete sentences. Her evidence does support her claim. She's talking about how it was formed from water down here. She gives an example. She uses her card and actually talks about what she sees. And I can start to like create that story in my mind of, okay, well, what is she getting to? How does her evidence support her claim? She started putting that into my head about, this is formed from water, while one that was formed from lava might look different. So going back up to my actual grading here, I will check off Jasmine for her evidence, and she got both of her 2 points. So far she is at 4 out of 4. Now let's go and look at her reasoning. The reasoning was probably the most important part, which is why it was worth the most points. If I go down to Jasmine's reasoning, she says, "My evidence supports the claim because when they sent the rover to observe and take images on Mars, it came back and had images that looked the same as conglomerate. We can also observe that Mars is a rocky planet, and with conglomerate, it has many different pebbles. We found the same rock on Earth near channels with flowing water. This means that flowing water was a geological process that could have formed the channel on Mars. There's a lot of really good things to point out in this section right here. But first, I'm going to go through my little checklist. She definitely used complete sentences and talked about how her evidence supports her claim. I see that right here. My evidence supports the claim. She explains how it actually supports the claim. She tells me why. She uses scientific vocabulary pertaining to the unit. She uses a lot of it. She talks about conglomerate. She talks about the channel. She doesn't just say landform. She talks about the channel. She uses the word geological process. She talks about it being a rocky planet. These are all vocab words that we use. Even like rover and observe are things that we talked about earlier on in this unit. So she does a ton of vocabulary in this answer. She also definitely explains how or why it's correct, that if this process forms the same type of rock on Earth and we're on another rocky planet, it must be the same process. So going back up to our actual grading here, for her reasoning, I would say she did all of these things. She explained the geological process. She didn't really use the model, but she did talk about the triangle shape. It's okay if she didn't use the model. You only needed one piece of strong evidence. So her reasoning would also be full credit, so a 3 out of 3. And you could tell, you only need to look back at it, she wrote incomplete sentences. I just highlighted a bunch of vocabulary she used, and she used appropriate sentence starters. So she definitely gets that 1 point here. So Jasmine on this actually wound up getting an 8 out of 8, so 100% there, which is a really good score. If you go through yours, you can actually go back into your form and edit it. See if you think you would get an 8 out of an 8, or maybe even a 6 or a 7. And take the time either today or maybe the next couple of days while you're working on MAP and don't have as much schoolwork to do afterwards to go back and edit your responses if you need to. I can tell you if you get anything less than a 6, it is going to be sent back to you to make edits, and it is being recorded as a grade. Some of you might get that grade back today and be told what you need to change. Some of you might not get it until later on this week. But I'm going to try and grade them and send them out to you as soon as possible so that when you are done with MAP testing and you have less assignments throughout the day, you can go back and really quickly make your edits. You can come back to this form as well if you want to see what an exemplar question or exemplar answer like Jasmine's looked like. Make sure you're not just copying her answer. I'll obviously know if you did that, but you should be using it as like a starting point of what you can make your argument into. So nice job, Jasmine. Awesome quality content there. And you guys can kind of take a hint from what Jasmine did here and why we checked off these different parts of her rubric and how she got an 8 out of an 8. Now, the rest of class today, you're going to actually be taking your mastery ticket on ecological succession. If you followed along in class on Friday, you watched all the videos and went through your Nearpod, we looked at ecological succession a lot. We looked at a lot of different examples and what each of them went through to go from a place that was uninhabitable to a place that has a really large ecosystem or a community of organisms all living together. So ecological succession itself is the process of an ecosystem, which is a community of organisms, evolving or growing over a long period of time, usually after a natural disaster. It does not always have to be after a natural disaster. You looked at an example of a ship which basically created a reef. This could be in a place that maybe just didn't have a lot of life before. We also looked at an example of a pond just slowly being filled in and changing into a different ecosystem. Those would be things that were not exactly natural disasters. But we did look at some examples too of like forest fires, floods, volcanoes, all of those natural disasters that would cause ecological succession to begin. There were 2 types of ecological succession. So we're going to look at them side by side here. And one type of ecological succession was primary succession. The big part of primary succession that separates it from secondary succession is right down here, this rock. If you just have rock and no soil, then you have primary succession. The best way to think about this is that it's kind of like you're in the first stage. Nothing can grow on rock, or very little can grow on rock. So it would be like the first stage. Secondary succession is when a disaster happens, but there is still soil. And you can see underneath this tree right here, there is still soil even after that fire. And you can see the roots still in the ground there. So that would be secondary succession. One way to think about that is like if we go from rocks to soil, we're already in the second step. So second step right here is kind of like getting a head start. That would be secondary succession. Now, the first thing to grow or first thing to inhabit these places are what we call pioneer species. Pioneer species are going to be species that don't need a lot to grow. Something like lichens would be a good example of pioneer species. They're little organisms that can grow right on rocks or in the cracks in between rocks. If you've ever seen moss growing on a rock, this would be an example of a pioneer species. Doesn't need a lot to grow, but it will grow in that area and start that ecosystem. After that, you can see that the organisms get more and more complex as you go on in both primary and secondary succession. You have grass and plants, you eventually have shrubs and small trees. And as those things grow in, you're going to start to get things like insects and bugs, squirrels, smaller animals that feed off of those types of things. And you will get to a climax community, meaning like a really stable community or a stable ecosystem, when you have larger species as well. So you can see here some really big trees, but in your example with the ship, we also saw that we got to a climax community when things like sharks and barracudas and larger fish started to move into that area. Because then what you wind up having is this food chain, and you have these smaller organisms that we started with getting eaten by other small organisms, and those get eaten by bigger ones, and eventually you have a predator in that area. And that can signify a climax community. Something else that can signify a climax community are the examples shown here, like a mature oak and hickory forest. Those take about 150 years to grow. So if that ecosystem has been able to build to that point, then that would be considered a climax community. It's really stable and can sustain itself. So what you're going to do next in your Google form is click the next at the bottom of the page, and you'll follow the link in the next page to your Elluminate Mastery ticket. It is 10 questions. Take your time. Keep in mind that I can see exactly how long it takes you to finish that. When you are done, you can submit that in the top right corner of your screen, and then go back and actually look at your Google form from Thursday. See if you think your writing matches up to that level of Jasmine's, or at least close to that level. And if you think that you need to add some more, you need to write incomplete sentences, because a lot of people need to fix that. You need to include specific evidence. You didn't include your claim. Your reason doesn't connect your evidence. Then go ahead and take this time while you're done with your mastery ticket and have a little bit less work this week to do that. So make sure that when you are done with this, you mark the assignment as done, you check your Google form, and you submit your Elluminate Mastery ticket. After this, you won't have another science assignment until Friday, unless I send you back your writing task from Thursday to edit. In that case, I'll be expecting that by the end of the week, and I'll ask you to come to office hours on Friday to make sure that it was turned in. All right, good luck on your mastery ticket. After that, have a good week, and I will see you tomorrow.